Hello and welcome to Autistic Radio. It's Radio Days, the event that we have as a group between Christmas and New Year. We have 4 hours of live broadcasting starting at 2 o'clock GMT every day. I'll be starting that off with some things I want to talk to you all about. The way that Autistic Radio is developing and what we see for the future. Also describing to the new listeners where we are now. Later on in the day, we've got something quite special. We've got one of our regular contributors here at Autistic Radio, Lucy. Lucy Dawson is the Autie Unmasked. She has a Substack, and as it's been developing, it's been a real partnership that we're loving. AutisticRadio.com enjoying the partnership with Autie Unmasked, where she puts her ideas out as a recently diagnosed adult woman in the world. We talk about the blog that she writes, and she allows us to add our own comments in on that. And I'm really happy to say that today we have Lucy herself joining us, so we'll be able to add a little bit extra from the horse's mouth. After that, at 4:44, we're going to go to a live drop-in. We don't normally do that live. We normally have the 4:44 on a Sunday, where people drop in quiet confidence that their voices won't be recorded. But we're switching it around today because the people who are joining us are all members of the Autistic Radio team, so they're used to having their voices put out there. Every day during the radio days we'll have a 4:44 drop-in, and we'll discuss whatever's on our mind. And I know that when they become podcasts, people around the world, especially those in autistic in English-speaking countries, listen to those conversations. For me, I listen to those conversations as podcasts when I'm going around my daily life, and it just gives me that feeling of sense of community and security, that there are other people who experience things in similar ways to how I do. At 5:55, we're joining Harry. Harry has a regular podcast here on Sundays. He makes it live, and we broadcast it live normally every Sunday. An hour and a half of conversation, but we're doing an hour each day during radio days. He puts together a Facebook page which doesn't have all of the nastiness that you associate with social media. It's a very quiet, easygoing space. He picks up generally positive ideas from the internet about autism for us to discuss, and we will be having a number of our members joining us at 5:55 every day, not just every Sunday, but here on Autistic Radio Days for the 4 days that we broadcast live to you, 27th, 28th, 29th and the 30th of December, the quiet days between Christmas and New Year. Did I forget to say anything, Lucy? You're with me here in the other studio. Did I get everything right? What did I miss out?
I think you covered everything, Jules, to be honest.
It's lovely hearing your voice.
Thank you, and you.
Oh, well, it's been a year, hasn't it? Where are we with Autistic Radio? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel we're growing. I think it's quite nice we're getting some new voices in, like we did last week in the drop-in. Yeah, you know, it's just moving on and just carrying on the conversations, isn't it? And try and get as many people on board with us as we can.
Oh, now you worry me. It always worries me. I don't really want this to become too big. I just want it to be our, you know, there are already enough people listening.
Yeah, maybe, but you know, yeah. It's there for people to jump onto. If you know, it's a feeling of community, and if that's a big community or a small community or a medium-sized one, I mean, there's so many stories. So who knows?
Yeah.
We
That's
take
true.
it where we go with it, don't we? But yeah, we always have done.
I know it's reaching people. I mean, if I look at the different countries that we reach, I can stick a little flag in the map for almost the whole world now. But also the numbers of people listening to us, because we're in so many different places. If I collect all the numbers together, which I don't do, because it frightens me, there's a good community in all the different places that you can listen to podcasts. So I feel as though there is a big enough group out there, and it's a worthwhile thing to do, just even at this space. And I always get a bit worried about it getting a bit too big. It might set off on fire like these viral things, and that's really not where we are, is it?
No, maybe not that big, but like I found you. That was the thing. I mean, I was out there searching for something, someone, somewhere to go. When I first started doing blogging, and when I started working with the kind of the people that I'm working now, where I am a expert by experience, apparently, I was looking for a place to go. So I looked online and I searched through, and I found Autistic Radio. So it can be just as sort of organic as that. And that felt very organic. It's like I found you, and then I got on board, and I realised this was a safe little space for me to dwell in and speak to people with the same kind of thoughts and feelings as me. So maybe it's that organic thing that we're looking for, really.
Yeah, I feel that we've hidden it for quite a long time as a group, and we needed to get our own confidence up. We needed to understand how to use the microphones and understand how to do some of the editing. Now we're at a place where we can put out more feelers, tell people about us more. It's a bit more of a confident place now. I think up until this point we were never sure that we would continue to get how we do things working if we were too busy with lots of listeners. It almost felt as though we had to get it right before we got it popular. Yeah, maybe we are there now. Maybe it is time for our listeners to tell other people about us.
What is there to be afraid of, Jules? Really? I mean, we've got it to a point now where it does happen quite easily between us. We've got a group of people now who speak really quite easily together and can back each other up, and so yeah, let them come find us. It's good.
Yeah, well, there is something to be afraid of, though, isn't there? Because if you've got something that's complete and polished, then it's difficult for people to join in. What am I talking about? I'm trying to say that how do we make sure that we still collect the people like yourself who are willing to give it a go? When it's small and when it's hidden, people will give it a go like yourself. But if it looks too big, that will put people off, no?
Do you know what? Before actually joining and finding you, I did actually find some much bigger groups, much more publicised groups. You weren't. I hate to say this, but you weren't my first my first point of call. I found you, but as I went along, I was seeing other things that I really didn't like. Some of these groups that didn't seem to, or they weren't very responsive when I spoke to them, which is what I was doing at first. Is that I emailed you, I think, initially, and said that I'd be interested, and I was doing this for a lot of different groups, and a lot of them were quite hostile to that, and I didn't feel like it was going to be my comfortable space. But this has become my comfortable space for my chatting. I enjoy my Sundays and, having a chat with everybody, and that sort of ends off my weekend. And, so there are places that I have tried that didn't have this feeling of, we all know each other, we can all be open in each other's company. Maybe that's an advantage we got. Going massively big might make things difficult because it's a lot more admin, isn't it? When you've got tons and tons of people on a chat. But having like usually the 4 or 5 of us here is generally a good number for the chat. We could probably ask a few other people in if they wanted to.
Yeah, I don't think we need to get any of the things that we do bigger in themselves. 4, 5, 6 people speaking together, making a broadcast, having a chat together, and then putting it out for other people, and then quite a lot of other people will listen to that in a recording. That seems great. Making another one of those, and then another one of those, so that they're little groups, but they're all under the same umbrella, is kind of where I was thinking of going, rather than making it one big thing that, as you say, it's difficult to join after it's started. We have to have it so that it's modular in a way, so when somebody does come along to want to put their words out, that they feel there's a space there, but it's both small and big at the same time. It's small in the group that they interact with, but it's big in the effect because it gets broadcast everywhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in a nutshell. When you say modular, so you mean having a series of different groups that we get together in, or or is it sort of orchestrated like that?
I don't know. I think sort of different programs. I mean, I think eventually people will come and say, look, I've been on the 444 for a while. I started off just listening, and that's where most people stay. They listen, and that's the comfort, and that's interesting. Then if they want to get more involved, they might join us for one of the recording sessions, maybe just listening in on that, and being around people, and then going to text, maybe making a text comment, and then moving on to voice. But when people have got really confident, like yourself, putting out their voice, maybe the next thing is for them to take a program themselves, for them to, for under our umbrella, with us doing the editing and the work of a lot of the support behind it, make it so that they can then have their own group with their own theme, with their own idea, and it all comes under our umbrella. Does that fit?
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying, actually. Yeah, I have recommended our channel here to some people that I met along the way who were autistic, and they were saying the same sort of thing, kind of starting off really as just suck it and see, come in and have a listen. I've always told them there's no commitment to speak, but if you just want to sit in the background and hear the things that go on, then you're absolutely welcome to do so. I think they're a bit tentative, being a bit sort of careful with it, guarded, and I'm not surprised, because putting your voice out there is a difficult thing. And like you say, if people can kind of slowly integrate themselves and introduce themselves and chat with us or whatever, they'll see that perhaps this might be something. And it would be nice for other people to have, like I've had the opportunity to do my blogs and things like that on your program, on our program, and it's been nice. I quite like getting that out there and getting the opinions back off of something that I've written, mostly for myself, hopefully for some other people, but to get proper comments and conversation going on that particular thing that I'm doing is wonderful for me, and I hope it actually helps other people as well. But it's wonderful for me to have, when Raymond's here and we're kind of talking about the different aspects of it. That's great, and it makes me feel like I've got a little personal space here.
Okay, Lucy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play for the listeners one of our most recent 444 drop-ins as a pre-record, and then move on to a little bit of conversation after it, maybe add to it a bit.
Okay, cool.
Her words, we listen.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
Hi there. Every Sunday, a group of autistic people get together and drop in. It's an informal group, but some of the things that people say deserve a bigger audience. So they give us permission for us to put them in an edited reel. And that's what we're here for. Today's edited reel of the conversations that we have about our own autism. Cheers. Enjoy.
Listen. I just started to realise, like, we're not we're a bigger minority than I thought we were.
Where have you been meeting people, Nicola? Is it online or physical spaces?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah.
I should have pressed it earlier because of what you were saying, but I'm sure we're going to get lots of things that you say that are lovely over the time anyway.
Thank you. I heard somebody ask where I was meeting people, and the experience that I had that was really felt really remarkable was I ended up moving to a place near Edinburgh that was known for being a great place for artists and musicians and things to stay. Had a wee vibrant buzz around it. And when I was raising my children, I was like realizing things like they needed to be held all the time. And so I did the baby wearing thing. And I connected with all these other mothers who were into that. And none of us at the time were aware of this, but we all a lot of us had neurodivergent babies, because that's why they needed to have that constant kind of rocking contact. Like, it was the only way that our arms were free enough to cook a meal or do things like that. But we just thought that this was just normal. And I think it was through that group I met other mums who, I can think of 2 of them who got diagnosed with autism all around the same sort of time as me. And it was one lady in particular who said to me, asked me to do the AQ 10. So it was through that. I think I'd imagine that it's through any time that we meet in the wild is going to be in these little niche, like, enthusiast places in the world. So I was a baby wearing enthusiast. And then I got the opportunity to do the Embrace Autism course and had a really great experience from that. I found that really, really healing, actually. Like, just the normalization of these things that had been such big, difficult struggles for me, like, throughout my life, and that just to hear people talking about them and about all these little normal ways that we just come up with to accommodate ourselves and, like, build these lives that are completely fine. And it's just, I feel like I'm just coming from a world where there was this way that you're meant to live and I just wasn't doing it right, to just realizing we can just do what works for us.
Before I forget, I think it was an important point you made about children and your own child, how we can see a more, authentic representation of autism with them in comparison or in contrast to ourselves, who are probably masking or are found ways to compensate, and so filtered, as it were. And that's why it's so complex for us as adults. So it may be helpful, that approach. But yeah, what you're saying about niche places, I think a lot of us who took a while to be diagnosed, we're finding these niches anyway for common interests and passions and exploring them. It's why a lot of us kind of got a wee bit lost sometimes out in the margins with subcultures and this and that, for good or ill, So it just sounds great that you found those spaces. Sounds really cool.
Yeah, I was grateful for that, and it was nice to yeah, just I think when you speak to people who get you, I don't know, I can't even describe the feeling. It's almost like something just can kind of come into focus between you. And I would say with what you said about the authentic expression with the kids, I would so agree. I feel that the diagnostic criteria for autism, like they miss out so much on the humor and the like the description you have in the DSM for autism doesn't come close to the lived experience of autism. Um, and the clangers and that happen in our daily life, I just feel like the way that we connect as like an autistic family is just it's so fun and so delightful, and I don't feel like this that old idea that autism was this tragedy and it was a tragic to have like an autistic child. I can't see that at all. I feel that my children have challenged me to be more authentic, and I think that I probably got that to thank a lot for finding the courage to be able to communicate that clearly, that honestly.
Wow. Okay, let me jump on this and show how I relate, because hearing your empathy with your children, autistic guy who's been in a relationship with an autistic woman pretty much since she was 12 years old and I was 12 years old. So boyfriend and girlfriend since we were 15, and ran away together as two autistic people against family consent to then set up home together when we were 17. So we then had two daughters, and our second daughter is now a grown-up neurodivergent woman in a relationship with another neurodivergent woman. Both of our fathers we identify as neurodivergent. So your description of your family, it just puts you in this same grouping that I keep coming across with. There's a few farming families around here that have a whole group of neurodivergent people and they are like, if we take the Harry Potter analogies, they're like the wizards amongst the muggles. And even before we knew about our neurodivergence, our family used to use the Harry Potter wizard and muggles thing because we were so odd as a group. So yeah, this positive feeling that you get and I get, I'm sure is very much down to the amount of people we have around ourselves in our family and in their normal experience that create this safety of being a neurodivergent family that other people don't get.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And when I think of my family of origin, there's a lot, like I can see a lot of neurodivergence all the way through. But I do think that there's something really different about self-aware and like the awareness of oneself as autistic and being able to like live life authentically, to how healthy the dynamics can be, because I can see in my family of origin how kind of wrong things went too. The wizards can be dark.
Yeah, I think it's often in other conversations that we touch upon the mismatches that happen between different family members according to their neurotype. And I think there is a societal problem in the clash between the neurotypes, which is very weird to think of yourself as both very individualistic all your life and then also attached to this tribe of people that are the weirdos, the circus fucking freaks, the spazies of the world. My wife and I call each other spaz as a humorous kind of ableist joke, doubling it, turning it around on ourselves. We are very much part of this wider weirdness. I like it though. I like being the circus crew, you know?
Oh, I love it. I love being with my people. And what you said there about, the dark humor as well. Like my son has very dark humor about things, and he'll joke and make fun, and I'm like, oh no, we can't say that. We can't be ableist. And yeah, he just laughs at me for it.
I take my cue sometimes from Ian Dury, the god of punk rock, with his, what is it, spastica. He used to
Spasticus autisticus.
Spasticus autisticus, yeah. Wow. I mean, I did not know quite how much that related to me when I danced to it in the fucking 70s. But wow, yeah, good. That is just an example of just turning all this negativity around and just saying, in your face, guys, I'm proud of who I am. Over in the text, I noticed that Raymond is pointing out that the wizards are dark. And yes, okay, we take the point.
Sorry, I keep on pressing the button to leave, and I'm not meaning to do it. It's like, I think it's like a tick at this point.
I know the feeling.
I want to stay. I think it's just like I'm getting quite excited.
See, we're on the edge there. There's a bit of us, even though we're seeking our tribes and all that, want to be straight as well, We have a lot of straight expectations, standard expectations. Of course, because it conditioned us. It's how, even our language and everything. So I wouldn't go full out to the other side, I think it's almost like we're all the same and we're all different. It's just sometimes the power is with a set of standards, and that's what we're challenging, I imagine.
That is an autistic brain immediately fact-checking and going around it in beautiful intelligence, and I love it. Yeah, I'm so with that thought as well, because otherwise we get into this whole identity politics bollocks that means that everyone has to then start conforming in their unconformity. And it is a bit of a kickback at what we're faced with. And I think, sometimes it's good to kick up your heels and say, no, I don't want to be the normal like you anyway. I had something else today to say that I was running up to, but in my run up, I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Again, very autistic. And I've forgotten what I was going to say as well. So that's how it goes. I think, Jules, you once used the phrase I used to use, and it was like, what was it? Something like, so hip you were straight. It's like so far out you're back in. And it's kind of like that. There's like a weirdness that is really weird. And it's beyond all norms and non-norms. It's very fluid and it's quite scary. And that's why a lot of people don't go there. But I just thought I would touch on that. Yeah, it's also part of that kind of need for acceptance that we've all developed too.
I don't know if I still got a need for acceptance. I think I've accepted myself and I just go through life doing things my own way now. And it is up to each individual to take me as they find me. And I know that's kind of hard-nosed, maybe, that I'm just expecting people to accept the things that I do and, my little bits and pieces. But yeah, I don't know if I actually really need to be accepted by people in general. I can be quite happy on my own anyway.
Yeah, great. Say it loud, Lucy. It's just that sometimes I see it in myself as an old habit that dies hard, It's, if we do it this way, everything will be all right, and then it isn't, So you might as well just do it your own way.
It just comes down to your comfort level, really. I mean, it's something when you can kind of just be you as a really great thing.
some parts of some parts of my life I'll never really fit into, and and I have clashes with people that probably don't get me. But a lot of those people kind of run away from me anyway. I feel that sometimes maybe meeting me and having to get through the massive brick wall that I have in front of me and get through to the real me, maybe I'm not too worried. I don't know. I'm sort of train of thoughting now.
I think we can maybe try and help create spaces for us to just be ourselves and be accepted for that. Like, anybody comes into that space knows that this is how it's done, rather than that normative expectation when we go out into the big bad world that, we've got to compromise a wee bit and fit in, or, you can't be like that all the time, And we're only being like that because it's not comfortable. We haven't got that space where we feel comfortable. And it's not an unreasonable demand.
I think I take a lot of cues from my father, who is always my go-to on these things, where he could walk into spaces with his head held high and know that he's not going to fit in there. And actually, sometimes that difference he had was such a bonus to the way he lived his life. If you really just do everything you want to do in the way you want to do it. And that's what he was like. So, and I know that that's what he'd want for me. And he was always saying, if I did something that, that impressed him, if I, did something that was beyond my usual capabilities, he was really, like that. That was like, that's my girl sort of thing. So maybe I'm trying to be like my dad a bit.
Yeah, a friend used the word self-realization to me the other night. I had to go and remind myself what it really fully meant. But yeah.
There's been times in my life I've gone really deep into isolation as a reaction to the kind of challenges of, I feel like, struggling to communicate well. But now I'm trying to start a cooperative, and it feels like the biggest challenge. Like, it feels like it would be so much easier to try and just like find that self-employment and go that way. But I feel convinced that I can learn these skills to be able to do that, to be able to kind of work with alongside other people and have spaces that have healthy boundaries, but that are accommodating of people's like needs. And it's kind of all coming from these principles in like peer support, that comes from like the mental health recovery world, of this idea of trying to create broad stream instead of a mainstream. And I just really, really love that idea.
I'm nodding my head off here. Yeah, agreeing with you. You'll probably turn up where you feel the need most, where you're active.
Well, it's 5:44 now, so our drop-in hour is finished, and thank you to all the people who have texted, and also to the people who have put their voices to this, that are going to allow us to put some of those words out into the podcast. If you join us here at the 444, your voice isn't recorded, your text isn't recorded, but the people here have given permission so that it's an example for others. See you again, always reliably, Sunday, 4:44 p.m. Cheers, guys. Yeah, I thought putting that in the radio days as an example of what we do every Sunday at the drop-in will give people, a flavour of how simple it is. Does that come across, do you think?
There we go. That's the one. Wrong button. Yeah, it does. It's quite nice hearing it in that form, and it's also really nice listening back to it again as well, because it in the edited form, it becomes much more cohesive, and you can really understand, how the way things go. It's quite nice to have that.
Yeah, the only bit of edit I do for that is chopping off the beginnings where people are, you know, not really ready, and we're making our introductions to new people as they drop in. I chop that bit off, and then I take a bit from the centre of the conversations and leave it without any kind of edit, and then I chop off the end. So the bit in the middle is just dumping somebody into a random conversation on the podcast and then dumping them out of it, to give a sense of the easiness of it all, the fact that we're just talking. What we don't get is the silences. I love those silences that we have in the broadcast, where you've said something or you've listened to something and then your brain goes off somewhere else, and nobody's hassling you or saying, well, what do you think about this next, and what's your take on this, you know, that makes it authentically autistic to me, those silences in between everything that get chopped out automatically by the software. So, just so the people who are listening know, every Sunday at 4:44, there's a welcome drop-in for autistic people, usually adult autistic people. We have people of all sexes. In general, we would expect people to be over the age of 16. But we've also had people who have come along who are not autistic, who maybe are just trying to get a bit of a sense of the group before they then come and make a podcast with us. We had some authors do that. When people come along for the first few times, we wouldn't expect to use anything that they say or anything that they vocalize in the podcast until they get a feeling that they want that to happen. So everybody is recorded on different tracks, and we can just keep the tracks in of the people who want their words out there. So in the eventual podcast we put out there's going to be bits that people say that just don't get put in, making it a little bit disjointed as the conversation goes from one thing to another. There'll be gaps where people who aren't yet ready to have their voices out there, they're just excluded from the final edit. It feels to me as though the 444 is the way that people will always start with us, start to put their thoughts and ideas out there as advocates. They will be embraced by us, and we will facilitate it and nurture and make it possible for them to gradually, as they wish, to progress as far or as little as they wish towards vocalizing out to the whole of the world. And for me, I think the 444 is a very gradual initiation into that, and there's no expectation of people to go anywhere along the path. It's not set out so you have to go from stage to stage. You can stay wherever you are in your comfort zones. Now, that's me saying this because I kind of designed this. Now I've got the two of you who've, your regular contributors, but fairly recently, in the last few months, you've joined us. Is that coming across what I've tried to set out, and how can we make it better?
it's a bit of a head scratcher because I think it's good the way it is. You know, I don't think there's much you could do. I'm trying to think of if there's any way we could improve on it. But like you said, I'm really new here. So, I mean, what is it, 3 months or so that I've been regularly? And I guess from the beginning, maybe I'm not the sort of person who's really that backwards and coming forwards and speaking. So maybe I'm coming from this from a completely different angle. But it's a nice, it's sort of, you have to kind of go in, have a listen, get the idea of it, and then jump in. It's just that final jumping in is the thing, you know. I don't know how you encourage people to speak when they don't feel like speaking, but I don't know. But for me, this has been right. This has been what works for me, but I can't speak for everybody, can I?
Yeah, it's the usual thing, isn't it? Horses for courses. Well, we've got other things, haven't we? Sometimes people will contact us and they say, I've got this project, I want to talk about this, and we'll make a date for a podcast with them directly, and it'll all be offline and we can nurture them in that space. It always feels to me that's a big... When I first did my first podcast, it wasn't here at Autistic Radio, it was being a guest on another podcast. I was talking about something I know about, which is autism in business. And I, before that podcast, did everything I could to prepare. I over-prepared, I overthought it, I bought equipment, I practiced, I spoke into microphones and listened back on... I had to do everything I could to reduce my own stress and anxiety about joining into that podcast and putting my words out there. I think that is actually quite a difficult thing to do, to actually just, you know, send an email and then end up on somebody's podcast show. I would have preferred, I think, to have gone to a 444 and had a little bit of a conversation with a few people before I jumped into that. Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? Everyone goes in at where they're comfortable, but even people like myself who maybe can put their voice out there a bit. Before my first podcast with somebody else, I got totally into it and stressed, and I didn't need to go through that. I could have had an easier way in, and I think that's what the 444 is creating for people.
Well, I think, yes, I may have already spoken about this, but I did a podcast before I joined you on a general show. I'm not going to name it. Nice guy, really, really lovely. But I felt like I'd walked in on something where I just couldn't answer his questions. I don't ever put myself forward as being any kind of expert or being any kind of... I don't have letters after my name. I haven't studied anything. You know, I only come from this from a very sort of me-centric sort of way. And I did this podcast not really knowing how it was going to be, but thinking I was going to have an answer for everything, to find that he wanted facts, figures, numbers, you know, how many men to women are diagnosed, and all the way through I was panicking, and I got so caught up in myself I started having a coughing fit, you know, just because my throat was dry, because my head was spinning, and it was a total train wreck. It was, because I tried to go in with no expectations, thinking that everything would just click and I would just get in there, say my piece, and I'd be understood, and you know, I was really looking forward to doing it, and I didn't get any sort of like pre-warning of how he was going to talk to me, and it was terrible. And I felt, coming out of that, I thought, I never want to do this again, but here I am.
in the text, Ray says, this is like relationships and conversations. As autistic people, we often avoid them, or we can't cope with them. And this is the same. We are exploring spaces for comfort and expression. The normal ways just might not cut it for us. Wow, I think that's it, isn't it? Doing things the way everybody else does them, to do with podcasting and broadcasting and forums and all those kind of ideas, they don't take into account the fact that we're fucking autistic. I was in a space that was supposed to be a forum with some autism professionals a couple of years back, and there was nothing about it that made me comfortable. And in the end, I was the only person who was managing to speak in that forum to any great degree, whilst a collection of autistic people were on the call but uncomfortable and unable and disabled from actually doing the thing that they were there for, which was to be part of a forum and put out ideas and discuss things and give their opinion. I just, at that time, part of Autistic Radio was to create a new forum where we spoke to professionals in a way that we were comfortable with. And maybe in one of the other days I will go on to discuss and say what the audio model here at Autistic Radio is all about for creating a forum and a two-way dialogue with the professionals that are out there.
Testing. Is everything working here?
Working perfectly, Ray.
Right. It sounds like you know what you want, because ultimately the question I'm always asking is, what do I want? What does anybody want? Why are we here? What are we expecting? Once you remove that, then it's kind of more comfortable and freer. So when you said you were at a meeting with a lot of autistic people and it was uncomfortable, I immediately wanted to ask, why were you there? There must have been a reason. You wanted something. You wanted to be there. And yet it doesn't work. So there's something in that about what we want before how to communicate, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, you're right. You're right in everything. Why was I there? I was there because I was invited.
I'm not right in everything, sorry. I am not.
No, you're right on everything of what you've just said is what I was trying to say there, Ray. Oh, God, no. Hold me away from anybody who feels that they're right on everything. I'm glad that you don't feel that.
Well, that's a truly autistic thing, isn't it? To think you're right about everything. You know, I think it's par for the course.
Ooh, we can have a conversation about that. I think we give the impression that we think we're right on everything, and I think some people do think that they are fixed and right on some things more than the general population. Yeah, that's a whole nuanced conversation, I reckon. But I take your point here in what you mean here. Well, going back to it and accepting your challenge there, and saying, yes, you are right. It's like, what do we want from these things? And that was a forum set up by non-autistic people under the guise of getting our opinion, finding out what we want, what we need, and then seeing if they could then translate it back for us into policy. That was what that was all about. But it wasn't working because they weren't able to create a space where any of the autistic people were willing to come forward with ideas. So yes, definitely one of the things that I want from Autistic Radio, and I think I share it with most people, is conversations with professional people that give us equity in the communication, that are in a form where we are comfortable right at the beginning, so that they then achieve what they want, which is getting knowledge from us, getting our feelings, getting our opinions, and being informed by autistic experience. I think that is one of the absolute aims behind what we're doing here.
Do you feel we got that kind of feedback from them, that they understand or can coexist and communicate in a common language?
The thing I love about speaking to autistic people is they don't mess about. You are straight to the point here, Ray, and I really appreciate it. Do I think? Partially. Okay? Partially, I think we have got to a place where some of the professionals are really open to what we're trying to do. And we have proved over the years that we can have really safe space conversations with difficult subjects on the table. I think to push the whole project forward, very early on I chose the most difficult conversation we could have, which was about ABA. I chose the most controversial subject I could find out there, and that was autistic people speaking to ABA professionals. And towards the end of the year now, we have created 20 podcasts that speak directly to that controversial group of professionals, and they are going away and coming back to us with ideas for co-production. So to some extent, I'm going to say yes, we've at least started the possibility in the most difficult way possible. But if I go to that particular forum I spoke about, the professionals in that forum were not able to deal with us with equity and communication. As soon as they no longer saw value in us, because they could no longer use us to create funding for themselves as we have a group, we're involved with autistic people, that's a tick in our box, they dropped us. And when we continued to invite them to come back into what we created as a space where we were more comfortable, and we changed around what they did and did it in a way that worked for us, and we created forums and we invited them in, eventually they dwindled away and decided that they weren't able to deal with us with equity and communication. Once we achieved the equity and communication for ourselves and we spoke to them eye to eye, they became uncomfortable. So it really depends on the professionals now. It depends on whether we've got professionals coming to speak to us that are willing to embrace an eye-to-eye level conversation with equity and communication and respect for us, or whether the professionals are still wanting to use us in the tokenistic way, which I believe is the majority of them.
But aren't we always just playing by their rules?
Help me with what you mean there. What rules are we having to conform to?
They set the agenda. It's like we're not having a conversation really. It's like we're playing their game. There's not much out there that is a true communication or conversation from my point of view, from my needs. That may be something I have to work on, but it always seems to hit that thing as you were explaining in what you just said about meeting and interacting with agencies in order to achieve things, that you get dropped because you hit a point where it's uncomfortable for them because you're taking them out of their safety zone. And of course, we're going in trying to, enable that for them, playing by their rules, their game. And we end up compromised and we're not communicating ourselves truly. Of course, I do believe there is a common language. We have to find it between all people. An element of compromise, but not too much.
Ray, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The only thing I would say is I do think we are achieving something towards bringing them into our comfort zone where they can also be comfortable. Where they're running away looks to me as though it's the professionals out there that have taken on this mantle of being very progressive and saying that what we really need is a conversation with autistic people and we need to listen to them. They're the people who have most difficulty when we take the conversation to them. It's the people who in the past have been potentially the most difficult people to speak to that have actually embraced our attempts at communication with them more fully. And I will say that I think we are achieving something bigger and better than has been achieved before. And we've got other autistic advocates that are gradually deciding our value. They've been watching what we're doing and they're deciding our value and they're contacting me privately and they will be taking the conversation to the autism professionals with us. Sorry, they've hit the 3 o'clock time. Do you want to just quickly come back, Raymond?
I've just got to say, isn't that a truism? The difficult ones are the ones that you ultimately end up falling in love with. You know what I mean? Because they're, there's a reason for all that.
Okay, well, we can be quite loose on Autistic Radio. We don't have to stick to full times, but we have an idea here that we have Lucy from Auti Unmasked. Lucy is a contributor to Autistic Radio, and also she has a number of other irons in the fire where she advocates as a person with lived experience or expert by experience. In her Substack, Auti Unmasked, she looks at incidents that happen and experiences that happen during her days and during her weeks. So I'd like to introduce Lucy and say, Lucy, let's look at one of your posts and have a discussion around it.
Yep, certainly. So I'm going sort of sequential here. So this is a post that I put up at the beginning of September regarding, it's really about social interaction. And it's called We're All Here to Support You, Panic Stations and Good Intentions. And this is just about something I was going through at the time that just I felt I needed to put down on paper. Shall I go ahead and read a section for you?
That would be lovely. If you read out a section, then we'll listen in intently.
Okay, so here we go. I've got an event coming up in a few weeks. I booked it ages ago. I'm absolutely stoked about seeing this band, and I have been incredibly excited to attend. Even though they've been going, and I've followed them for decades, they're still relatively unknown, so there's no VIP meet and greet package where you can pay 10 times the face value of a normal ticket to mingle with other Uber fans and the artists themselves for a few minutes of stilted chit-chat and perhaps a selfie before the meter runs out. Music has always been important to me. It's been a constant love of mine, threading all through my life from an early age. I started attending gigs when I was 15 with my older brother, and that was The Damned, by the way. It was brilliant. With my older brother, and was instantly hooked on the experience of being part of the crowd united by a common love. Okay. I'll read the next part and then we can start talking about it. So it's easy for me to see why. A crowd can shroud you in anonymity. The lights are low, the room is loud enough to drown out voices, and so there's no need for conversation. And at that age, when I was a drinker, alcohol helped me to lose all my inhibitions. I could shout, scream, sing and dance, safe in the knowledge that no one was taking any notice of me in isolation. How wonderful to be able to let off steam. There is still no other social environment that I can truly feel in charge of. Pubs are no good. They're big and overcrowded, and there's nothing to focus on apart from booze and other people. And now I'm teetotal. That's no longer a crutch. And I'll pause it there at that little bit so we can kind of talk about what's happening in that paragraph.
Yeah, I love the idea that you went to see The Damned. Because that's old-fashioned American punk, isn't it?
Oh, totally. The Damned were fantastic, and they still are.
Yeah, and what's the stereotype? The stereotype is that autistic people will not go out to a dirty, sweaty, grungy place crammed with people, joggling up and down, enjoying the music, shouting out loud, the lights, the music, everything about it screams, this is not an autistic space. But there we go. What are you doing? Straight out into it, Lucy.
It came from sort of listening to my brother's music at home, and then sort of the extension of that is trying to become more a part of that. I started experimenting, going out and going to gigs and enjoying that space. I realised very early on that this is a kind of a nobody actually gives a shit what you're doing place, and you can walk in there and there's so many people there, and everybody's sort of got their own reason for being there, but everybody is sort of in that same space together, and you feel like there's a community, but it's like a community you could be quiet with. You're all focused on one thing in a room, and so you're not the main event. And that for me felt like a really comfortable space. It's dark, it's noisy, you don't have to have long conversations, you can pop outside for a cigarette anytime you want, and just get out of that space if it becomes too much for me. But it was a road that I felt that if I walk down here, I'll be able to get that little bit of socialisation that I need and come away with that with a buzz. And being able to come away from people and actually feel buzzing inside instead of, I shouldn't have said that, I shouldn't have done that. It gives you that anonymity that is just so wonderful that you can let it all out. And that was my first experience going to gigs, and it's really informed everything I've done since.
What year was this, Lucy? Was this in the 80s?
No. My first gig, I think, might have been about 89. I'm not sure. I was only a kid when I went to see The Damned, and that was my first gig. But everything else is sort of 1990 onwards was my really transformative time. So that's when I really hit the town and went out and did a lot of gigs. So sort of very late 80s maybe, but certainly early 90s on.
So the reason I'm asking is the space sounds like it conforms to a certain identity. So say there was a major pop act of the time, would you necessarily go and see them, and would you feel the same way there? Or was it particular kind of identity common to a certain subculture or taste, let's say?
Okay, so my first actual real life experience of music was definitely in the 80s. So I must have been about 13 years old. and I went to what they used to call the Capital Radio Best Disco in Town, Junior Best Disco in Town. And my friends were going along, and they invited me. And I went along, and it was pop music. Who was there? I think Bros were there, and, you know, it was that sort of time. And honestly speaking, in that environment, didn't feel comfortable, didn't like the music. I couldn't immerse myself. I didn't know how to dress. I was really nervous about it. I went along. I remember bits of it now, but I came away feeling quite embarrassed by the way I was. You know, I really hadn't explored that yet. I still had a million inhibitions about going. And a lot of the time when people would ask me, I'd say no before I say yes to anything. But yeah, so I would go and see other kinds of music. But it was only when I got a little bit older and started to be able to go into this sort of counterculture sort of thing where it was sort of punk bands and, you know, bands like Rocket from the Crypt and, oh God, Skunk Anansie I went to see, that I realised that if I was in the right sort of environment, the people around me would be the right sort of people, I guess.
Yeah, the basic reason I'm asking is, like, I sometimes see it as, or I did see it as, a ritual space, you know, a place where you could go and feel safe and enact yourself and be yourself and discover and explore. That doesn't often happen in traditional environments. And as an extension of that, it's like, well, as I've got older, I don't do these things anymore. And I'm wondering, do you still do these things and still feel that space works for you? Because in my case, it's, I think it's to do with trauma, right? So when you're younger, there's maybe, the trauma isn't so deep. Well, it may be, but so to find a space when you're younger helps you a great deal to be yourself and to be less traumatized by society. Later, perhaps the trauma just gets a bit wearing and a bit overpowering, and any kind of social scenario can be difficult, although still worth exploring, if you see what I mean. But I'm very curious about this space where we can go and explore that need we have.
And I guess I cheat a bit. I do cheat a bit because a lot of, I still go. I mean, I went to 2-3 particular gigs last year where I go along, and actually these are all long time fans of the same things I am, so they will be in that space with me. So there's rarely any surprises for me anymore. When I was 16, 17 and just getting into these things, yeah, no, it's all a brand new experience, but now it's comfortable old shoes, because I will go and I'll see people whose faces I've been seeing for the last 30 years, you know. You just said like a working man's club. My husband used to play working men's clubs, and no, they're not comfortable at all. But this is a place where I'm aware of everybody around me being from the same era as me, and you know, and I can also find places like on Facebook where I can connect with these people outside of it, plan for it. They know me. This is what this is all about, really. This piece is really just explaining to the people around me how difficult it can be, so they understand.
I get a vibe here that the autistic part of the community, the neurodivergent part of the community, whether that be autism or brain injury or somebody who's born Downs, all of these different versions of the neurodivergent, the freak show people, the people who are circus folk and festival folk and pixies and fairies, and people who are willing to be outside the conventional way of expressing ourselves, because we are outside the conventional way of being just by our own brain structure. It feels to me as though we often are the people who create the tribes. We create the goths, we create the punks, we create the different genres that come through. And then afterwards, you, Lucy, even at your ripe old age of young, you're still accessing those things, not because it's an age group thing, but because there's a belonging for the people that chose that in the first place, that chose those spaces. And you'll find more people that are accepting of you in those spaces.
And it's becoming more difficult to find live music spaces that I can go into, because it's very much changed since, you know, the days when I first got into this, where there were gigs every night at different venues. In London, I used to go out virtually every night and see a band. And you know, I had one or two people that I'd bring with me from the other tribe to go along to these things. I had a best friend who went with me everywhere. So I would go to lots of different spaces and experience lots of different music. Bands that were big or small or whatever, but it was like a continuity. You kept it going, and it was great because you could do that every night. It's not so much now, and you don't really get the same sort of thing that you used to. So I'm always keen to get in with the people and that. So, and yes, I'm ready to read on if you would like me to.
In your own time, Lucy.
Sorry. Okay. So everyone I know is lovely. And with every anniversary of this quirky, obscure band's formation, we all grow another year older and another year wider. But even so, my autism still finds a way to get in the way. I've never been able to shake my anxiety completely, and right now I'm already feeling uncomfortable about this gig. I'm also keen to be at it. This is the point in time when I am walking through how the day is going to look, the journey, the hotel, getting ready and heading off to one of the only social events I know I'll be going to this year. It's the wide gaps either side of the show that I know will be the toughest part. The train journeys and checking in and out are just the start. Before the gig, everyone meets up at the nearest bar and catches up with one another. I'm always twitchy and unable to think of anything to say. I have no sense of how to chat. I try to think of the right words, but nothing comes. I often find myself mute and floundering. People ask how I've been and what I've been up to, and I genuinely wonder why they care. And the next part as well, I just read this last chapter, the next paragraphs, rather. In anticipation of this, I will often post about my building fears, for this is where those social media sites come in useful. Honesty is always my best and only policy. I'm determined not to have to pop that awful mask back on and hold the fear inside. There have been times in the past where that nagging, dull, ambient terror would develop into a slowly unfolding dread and then transform into physical panic. The worst of these have led me passing out. So you can imagine how important it is for me to get a grip on this before it gets a grip on me. And I think I'll pause it there if you have any questions.
I love that, Lucy. But I do also recognise that that fear. You've got this thing that you know is absolutely part of your history, a gig. You know you're going to be amongst a crowd that are going to be okay in comparison to other crowds you might be in. But still looking ahead, there's still a fear about it.
walking into any space is a big deal for me. And in fact, if you allow me, I'll just read the next paragraph, as it just kind of, it sort of sums up this sort of catch-22 that I'm in. So, of course, the almost laughable irony of making my anxiety public in advance of a potentially stressful event is that well-meaning acquaintances try to bolster and reassure me by telling me to stick with them on the night. They'll shield me from the awkwardness. Stick with us. We're all here to support you, they say, with the best intentions in the world, oblivious to the fact that, in part, it's they, I won't say I'm afraid of, but that are certainly a contributory factor to my angst. I don't mean to sound ungrateful, as I know they are nice people and trying to help, and I almost didn't share this little slice of pathos for fear of offending anybody, but such is the intricacy and catch-22ness of my condition.
So true.
Yeah, well said. We're always stuck in this irony, aren't we? We try our absolute best to be appropriate and to get the best of our lives, and the more we do that, the more we fail to also at the same time express in ways that are easy to accept from us that we are still struggling. Somebody who is dealing with their anxiety or their fear or their social issue and pulling themselves to push themselves to go for it, to go out there and do it, masking up even and covering up what we really feel, it works against us at the same time, because people will immediately often click to, well, they're okay, there's nothing we need to worry about now, they're all going to be fine, and we don't need to worry about Jules or Lucy or Ray or whatever. They're managing, but we're not. We're like the swans in, the old cliche of the swans, smooth on the top, as passive, as non-threatening, as quiet and resting face as we can on the top, and underneath there's so much going through our heads that makes things difficult for us.
There's often a misunderstanding that the thing that I want to do by telling people about my anxiety is to draw them closer to me. And I don't like people getting the sense that I'm pushing them away from me at all. I don't want them to feel that way. And I'm always so grateful that offer is there on the table. But people take it to extremes where, they're treating me in a way that I know that they're being a little bit careful, but and all I really want to be is sort of isolated, allowed to enjoy that space maybe by myself, and maybe not having to talk to anybody at all during that night. But I get so many offers of, if you hold my hand and I'll take you through it, and I have to refuse because that's really not what I'm there for.
I think there's a different level of understanding that we need to access in these situations. Not we ourselves, but other people too, because they're often well-meaning, trying to help, but it's happening on that level that isn't really understanding. It's more sort of like the done thing. And to really understand, I think, is like a form of coexistence, just being in the same place, being in the same comfort as well. It's rare, and it comes when you don't do the other thing, which is like over concern or thinking too much about someone. But this is really good writing because it's making me anxious just hearing it, and so it's like really well written. You've captured it, and it's just I just wanted to focus on that thing of like Well, when you're going to these things, you said that you want to be there. There's something you want, but there's all these hoops you have to jump through to get there. And these are the things that are discomforting. The thing itself, the event, the band, your joy isn't a problem. Your friends aren't really a problem. It's just the way it's structured sometimes becomes such a chore.
It's not a cry for help. I'm not asking anybody to help me in any way. I'm just asking them to allow me to be me. And if they come across me and they say, "Hey, how are you?" and I say, "Yeah, I'm fine," and that's the end of the conversation, then that should be it. I should be able to say, "I can't speak anymore," and then slink off. And I tend to do that anyway. I tend to just try and disappear a little bit, knowing that everybody knows who I am and what I am. But that isolation is maybe something I'm craving, so I can just forget the world and just enjoy myself.
Exactly.
Shall I carry on reading the next little part, because it's always, I think this bit's quite important as well. So this is the last couple of chapters, paragraphs, sorry. I'm always thrilled to be invited to things. I do isolate myself sometimes, but there is always a large part of me that yearns for more human contact. I sometimes have to set some limits. I once told someone that I would go along to their Christmas outing, but they'd only have me for an hour, and then I'd have to escape. No offence, seriously, I understand. Hang on, my phone's ringing, so I'm just going to pause for a second.
That's part of it, isn't it? People's expectations. Other people's expectations of social interaction are often much bigger than we want. We would much prefer to have them intensely for short periods of time and then get away, recover, sort ourselves out. Or, as Lucy's expressing, enjoy something in a solitary way amongst the group. Be taken away by the music, be involved in it to such an extent that it looks as though you're not part of the group because you're there. And finding that balance where people don't feel as though they are losing out because you're not reacting in the way they want to be socially, but also finding your own space so you can enjoy it in the way you want when your brain is different to theirs. That's a negotiation that we can only keep creating and making. It will constantly fuck up, but it will also often enough find spaces amongst friends where it does work out, where you can say, I am fine, I just need to take it on in my own space, in my own head right now. And how we find ways to express that to people around us that want to help us in the way they would want to be helped, rather than in the way we want to be helped, is one of the big problems, one of the big conundrums in the experience of being neurodivergent, I guess.
And I understand that everybody's intentions are gold, solid gold, and they really mean it, and they've seen my face around for years, and it is sad that I can't get right the way in there. I've been doing this. I've been going to gigs now. I'm 51 now. And my first gig was when I was like 15, 16. So this is a space I've been in so many times. And, and as yet, I still haven't found the perfectly calm and easy way of doing it. I'm still nervous. But I know there's going to be a payoff in the middle that I really, really enjoy. And then it will finish. And then the anxiety will start again when people start coming up and speaking to you afterwards.
You know that thing when you're on holiday, say, and it's a comfortable holiday, one you want to be on, and you're there, and it's no real issue. And this happened to me in Germany in a couple of places. It's like you're just sitting out somewhere having a coffee and music's playing, a band's playing. There's some kind of live entertainment going on. There's no pressure. That kind of thing can be quite appealing. It can be annoying as well if you don't want it or you don't like the content of it, say. But that experience of just coming across something in the wild like that, and ideally what would be nice would be your favourite band doing that, you know, in a wide open space, you know, which, you know, is capitalism all the way down, you know what I mean? It's like everybody has to conform to the thing in order to make cash. It's the way it works. To do things for free and all that is, you know, some people do that, but it's not, it doesn't bring home the bacon.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to finish this reading. There's only one paragraph left, so I'll read this one out to you. And this one is really just going out to all the people that I talked to on Facebook. I said the same thing to them. So it goes like this. I love you all. I just can't cuddle you. I'm not demonstrative, and I was never taught to be. If Ticketmaster had an option whereby I could just see the band at the instant they go on stage as part of the throng and then leave at the last struck chord, I would happily pay 10 times over the face value for the service. It would cancel out the awkwardness of those catch-ups before the show and then the final encore ending, the lights coming back up and the atmosphere dispelling, and that final round of goodbyes. I could call it the neurodiverse see and flee package, and I think I might just be onto something.
Sorry, Lucy, it was almost like I predicted what you were going to say.
That's cool.
It just shows how much of a truth it is. I'm going to put an anecdote in here. My wife and I, a decade or so back, were really into Eddie Izzard, Susie Izzard. And in those days it was Eddie, and Eddie was the comedian that was surreal, the comedian that got to us partly because of neurodivergence, I think, partly because what he managed to present was a very neurodivergent way of looking at the world in his comedy, and it was special to us. So as he became more and more well known, we had the opportunity to go to a huge gig in Ireland, a stadium kind of place, and exactly like you're saying, we weren't comfortable being with that football crowd of people, and when we sat in our seats to concentrate directly on what Eddie then was saying, it was almost spoilt by the people around us. My wife was actually annoyed by a woman next to her that was laughing in completely different places to where we would find the humour. And looking around, when she mentioned this, we looked around the people around us, and there seemed to be a performance of the people around us as an audience. They were performing back, this is how I perform as an audience, and that was what they were getting pleasure from, and that's what they should get pleasure from. That's why they're there, what they want from it. But for us, it was a non-conformist moment amongst conformist people. It was, these people aren't experiencing it in the way that we experience, and we feel almost excluded by the loudness of them and the demonstrativeness of them, and the lack, it felt to us, of the connection with the person on stage. I still love Susie Izzard's work and everything she has done now. She, in the television programs that she puts out, and watching Eddie become Susie over a whole period of time has been a lovely thing. But it's still back to this conformity of the group, where you go to the gig and you would rather just have a community with the person on stage direct and not be amongst this group experience that everybody else is there for. Everybody else is getting something from the group experience, possibly more than the communing with the person on stage.
Maybe that's why I've always kept it so small, bands that are slightly off that scale, so they're not going to be performing in huge venues. One of my huge loves when I was a teenager was Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer, and the show that they did, and I'd watch every week religiously. It was my thing, and I thought it was the best thing in the world. I discovered it when it first came on, and it was really surreal and different and really got to me. And then I had the chance to go and see them in Hammersmith, the Hammersmith Apollo, which is a massive venue, and it was absolutely packed with people. And I was sat there in amongst a lot of other fans, and it felt very different to when it was at home, just me and the telly, because I felt like I was sort of transported into that world, because it was like an isolation thing. It was me watching them and laughing and really joining in. When I got into the crowd of people going to see it, it lost its edge. I felt like I was just lost in this sea of people. Then there was no connection, because, there were people with their heads in the way and laughing in the wrong places or talking when I didn't want them to. And I found the experience a little bit annoying, if anything. And I think that's the thing, if you don't have that sort of one-on-one, being able to focus on that completely, and it sort of knocks you slightly sideways, so you don't really enjoy yourself because you're so aware of the crowd.
Raymond in text says, a friend who was a regular punk music lover now finds her home being loyal to certain BBC Radio 6 programmes. Radio 6 here in the UK is the alternative music genre programme. Often it's the programme where we look back on niche genre of music and the upcoming new stuff that hasn't met the mainstream yet. So there's definitely something about the autistic experience where we need to be in the smaller spaces, and when those different groups and bands become large and mainstream, we stay in the smaller spaces maybe.
I've never been to see a band in a really big venue before. So I've seen sort of stage things, but I've never seen music in a really big, like, stadium setting. I'd never go to the O2 or any of those places, because I just feel they kind of, for me, it dehumanizes the experience, and you're just a ticket holder and you go through. And that it feels very disconnected once you get into a place like that. First of all, you're probably watching 100 miles away on a screen, but also just the noise of people drowning out what I want to hear.
Those recent Taylor Swift gigs were like totally frightening. If you consider it as a ritual space, these are huge events carrying a lot of power. And I was driving home a shortcut, thinking I'll escape, some really bad traffic jams in town. And it took me past the big rugby stadium where she was playing that night. And during the day, there was all these people. There was a massive queue for memorabilia. And it was just, some of the people were really interesting, a delight to look at, having a nice day out. But, what an experience.
So you just triggered all my memories of being a merch girl and selling merch to people. So I'm just that my mind's just suddenly switched to what that was like, and meeting people over the shop counter. It was kind of a weird place to be in a gig, because you do get all the fans and fanatics and really interesting people come to speak to you. I used to get nightmares the night before I had to do the gigs though, because they were really hard work. But it was. You did get to meet people who were just so fanatic about things, and they really loved you being there. And yeah, that was an experience and a half.
Yeah, the merch counters were really interesting. Some of the bands I used to see, it was like AK Press used to have a stall. It was like this anarchist press who published all these obscure books. So you'd meet interesting characters there, and obviously you pick up rare items as well. Certain CDs that might be very, very hard to get, you would find there at the gig.
Well, that's the end of the piece there. So I've come to the end of that, and I don't know if anybody's got anything else to say. But yeah, that's an interesting one for me, and it was a very popular one as well. It was one of the only pieces I put up where I got an awful lot of views. Probably because people I knew were jumping into it. But it's for me, that is just like my life experience, and really how I still am and how I'll always be. I'll always have that little bit of panic inside me for everything I do, and I just have to live with it, cope with it, and I find the more I'm vocal about it, the more people know about me, and that's probably a good thing.
That's lovely, Lucy. I'm hoping that we'll have you back during radio days, possibly even tomorrow, to take up one of your other posts on the conversation at 3:00 again tomorrow. But if not, we'll be returning to you at other times during the year, where we discuss what you do in Auti Unmasked. I'm going to take us now to one of our podcast streams and put the most recent Sunday 555 broadcast from Harry. Harry has a Facebook page that he looks after for us, and it's the only part of the Facebook that I look at because I know that it's a safe space to go to, and I know that Harry has thought about the different posts that he shares there. I'll put a recording on now from the most recent podcast that came from that, and then we'll see whether there's time to discuss that afterwards or whether we go straight into the 444 in an hour's time.
Our words, we listen.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
We speak. Our words. We listen.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
Hello and welcome again to Autistic Radio. Yes, it's Christmas, but we're still here. Today we're going to have Harry's Facebook conversation, the last one of the current run before we get into Radio Days. And Radio Days will be on the 27th, 28th, 29th and 30th of December. There will be 4 extra Harry's Facebook programs at 5:55.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
We speak. Our words. We listen.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
Hi there. Every Sunday, a group of autistic people get together and drop in. It's an informal group, but some of the things that people say deserve a bigger audience, so they give us permission for us to put them in an edited reel, and that's what we're here for. Today's edited reel of the conversations that we have about our own autism. Cheers, enjoy.
Listen.
I just started to realise, like, we're not we're a bigger minority than I thought we were.
Those days between Christmas and New Year, and we want you to direct some of the things. I'm not entirely comfortable with some of the ways that I interpret the work of the two people that are coming up, so I need an autistic angle on this if anybody's out there to help us. And the second one is we now have the go for a series looking at ABA from a very autistic point of view. We have essentially platformed a group of behaviourists, and they have come to describe their take, and we have found common ground in that. It has been surprising, but we really do need now voices from the autistic community to maybe give challenge to some of the things that they have heard. We will make sure that this is respectful all the way through, but I am being encouraged by members I respect of the autistic community to continue this difficult task of having an open conversation with the behaviourist community. Well, lovely. I can relax now, and I can pass over to the host. Harry puts forward all of these different posts, a revelation for me because I don't go social media anywhere else. Harry, can you take hold of the show now and give us the Facebook posts from this week?
Good evening, everyone. This is the live on Mars for 15th of December 2024. And the first post is from Autism NI, Northern Ireland's main autism charity, and supports over 35,000 autistic people. And what I've shared is a post about my unique Christmas. Christmas can be a challenging time for autistic people, and Autism NI is here to support our vibrant autism community enjoy Christmas their own unique way. Together, we can make Christmas inclusive. Cheryl shares her story and what Christmas means for her family. I have learnt that not everything needs to be perfect. It is okay if we do not all eat Christmas dinner, or if the kids eat chicken nuggets and chips. We don't have to be the same as everyone else. The most important thing is that my kids are happy. And the full story is on Autism NI's website from the Washington family.
There are no rules for Christmas. There are no rules generally. People may want to talk about discipline, order, but sometimes we have to drop the rules.
I think there's this sort of fantasy, I think we talked about it before, there's this sort of fantasy that Christmas preparation, dinners and the way that you should do things, it's done in a certain way and everybody has to abide by it, and if you don't, you're strange, you're weird. Surely everybody is different at Christmas. It must be different for everyone. So that's something I want to say on this. But it's good to see these stories shared because assumptions and stereotypes are always made.
I don't do any Christmas, and I haven't for many years. I lived alone for 10 years and I just stopped even thinking about the whole Christmas thing. I think it's too much hassle. I think it's too much stress. I think it's too much money. I think it's too much of everything. I don't mind having a small celebration. We always do. We have like a nice dinner, but I just think it's all the excess, all the push. I mean, we've had the ad since November, and by the time we get to December, we're just exhausted by the whole thing. There's so much stuff. And I just feel that a lot of it is just for nothing. It's just, and by the time you get to the other end of Christmas, everybody feels disappointed. I tend not to, because I didn't do Christmas in the first place.
Yeah, I can understand that. Not just the commercial, but just the stress for a lot of people go through for that one particular day. As soon as Christmas happens, and I feel like every time it comes, it's like I'm sitting and I'm thinking all of that shit, all of that expectation comes up to today. And then you're thinking, then tomorrow it's like, it's all gone.
I have a relative who shall remain unnamed who thinks that I am completely off my head because I don't do Christmas. And she says, but it's beautiful and it's sparkly and it's lovely. And I just say, yeah, but is it worth the effort? And she always says to me that I'm strange. But that's my Christmas. My Christmas is quiet. It's a day of reflection. It's a day to rest. It's nice to have nice things in the house, but I can't be bothered with a Christmas tree. I just think it's a day when we should all just be saying, relaxing in our own way.
And they say we're the weird ones. Is that all there is?
I am weird, Raymond. I like being weird. I want to be weird. Weird is me. I'm going to go against everything here. I'm going to say, with the post, just do it your own way, how you want, just what the post says. Don't say Christmas is rubbish. Just do the Christmas you like. I know that other people push you and prod you in other directions. The more chance you get to chill out, get off, do yourself, do less, and not try and do everything, the better. But it's difficult. I'm going to have a great Christmas. I'm going to do bugger all. I think my treats are going to be a big 2-litre bottle of dandelion burdock, which is going to cost me about £1. Probably quite a big meal. And a few chocolates here and there. There's not going to be a big thing. It's just going to be a nice few little treats, and I'm just going to make myself smile.
The next post is from Pandas Online, who's an author and promoting acceptance of neurodivergence and support based in the UK. And what they say is about Christmas shopping. Christmas shopping can be a bit overwhelming, especially with the crowds and noise. If it feels like too much, consider shopping online or heading out during quieter times. Having a list can also help keep things manageable and prevent sensory overload. Remember, it's okay to take breaks when needed. Find a quiet spot, use ear defenders, or bring along something comforting. If it still feels overwhelming, there is no harm in leaving and trying again another day. Your well-being comes first.
I'm remembering the last minute rushes you used to get when, you say you were not bothered with Christmas, and then Christmas Eve, it's like the guilt hits. And then it's like, oh, I've got to get a card for someone. I better get them something if I'm visiting them. It's like this obligation to participate in this kind of transaction thing, which may be entirely all my own fault, but that's how it used to be back then. And you weren't alone. There were a lot of people doing a similar sort of thing. And it was just a dreadful time.
The next post is from Autistic and Living the Dream. A personal blog, PhD student, researcher, speaker and trainer. And what they said is, I thought I'd share our morning affirmation from Finch. Please repeat this affirmation 3 times. I release what no longer serves me.
I would abbreviate this to I release me.
I don't do the affirmation thing, but I can see the point of it. I think a routine of telling yourself and giving yourself a break and telling yourself that you're worth it is a very good thing to do. And any affirmation that makes sense to you is a good affirmation. This is what they've chosen. So choose your own. I do something else, and that's whenever I catch myself going, oh, that was a stupid idea, or, oh, I'm stupid. Anytime I say that out loud or I say that in my head, I immediately, if I'm aware, I overcome it and I say back, no, I'm not stupid. No, that's it's a mistake. Mistakes happen. It's a mistake. Mistakes happen. And I do it again and again and again until I beat that bad, negative habit away. I think that is valuable for me. And I've been asking other people to do it at different times in my life. And, it becomes something we say to each other.
I've done it myself. I mean, I did it the other day there because I had a long week, and saying to myself is like, enjoy it rather than dread it. And I was thinking, because there was some places I had to travel, at some places I had to deal with things that, I didn't really, not that I didn't want to deal with it, but I wasn't looking forward to doing so. But then there was this sort of thing of kind of telling yourself that's what you do. And don't overthink, just do. Because most of the time, if not all of the time, it works out well. And it works out for the best. And that was including even meeting my family up in Glasgow, because I was sort of dreading it because it was going into a busy place at a busy time. But I kind of reassured myself not to overthink it, not to overprepare as such, and just do. And that's exactly what I've done. And there's even sometimes I think myself, yes, come on, yes, oh, I feel good, because I'm giving myself a G up because I felt a little bit flat. And sometimes these sort of messages, especially if you're an overthinker, and maybe that you've had a bad experience, you're overthinking about it, and you're overthinking the past, sort of thing to do, affirmation thing, I suppose is one way of helping you get back. The next post is from Devon Autistic Modelers Society. And what the post is saying is, hi chaps and ladies, admin, Ryan here to let you guys and girls know that I will be going live on Sunday the 15th of December. I'm going to be doing 2 live streams this weekend. On Sunday, the first show, 7:30 p.m. UK time, and the second show at 8 p.m. UK time. So feel free to join me for a chat and feel free to ask questions about autism and modelling in the comment sections of this post or in the live stream. Also, feel free to comment on what models are and have you guys and girls been working on at the moment. Feel free to post the models you guys and girls are and have been working on, and we will share your work. Also, live streams will be recorded video after that's finished so that you guys and girls can rewatch it just in case you miss either show.
I just absolutely love it. It's so neat. And it's an autistic interest, passion, something that you get into. I remember making models when I was younger, and I think it is a thing in neurodivergent people to do things, modelling for train sets and modelling for aircraft and all kinds of things. So I just think it's lovely. And it's at Christmas. It's the kind of thing you want to do. And I'm glad that's been up on our Facebook page.
Post is from Neurodiversity Manitoba, a mental health service. Neurodiversity affirming lived experience supports for schools, adults, families, teens, and children, and based in Canada. And what it's talking about is a guide to neuro-inclusive holidays. Tips for helping everyone feel included during the festive seasons. The holidays are a blessing and a curse both. Some people absolutely love them, some people dread them, and most of us are somewhere in between. For me, I enjoy seeing my son take pleasure in his favourite parts of the season. Seeing him get excited about time with family, time at school, and of course, gifts. I enjoy visiting with our close friends who are chosen family here in Manitoba, as our families all live in different provinces. However, many aspects of the busy holiday season can be very challenging for everyone, in particular autistic folks. I will share some strategies and advice to make your holiday more inclusive to everyone. So plan for downtime. Some people like to pack the holidays full of activities, visiting parties and socialising as much as possible. This may be fine for some, but way too much for others. Stock up on safe foods. Another holiday expectation is to eat meals at other people's homes. Some autistic folks have major sensory sensitivities or food aversions and really struggle with new foods. Some absolutely cannot eat certain things due to taste or texture. Offer a quiet space if you can. Sometimes having a quiet space to regularly and take a break from the sensory overload makes a significant difference in our ability to manage, even enjoy the holidays. Don't expect a big fuss over gifts. A lot of autistic folks are uncomfortable with receiving gifts. It's not because we aren't appreciative, or even because we don't like the gift itself. It's often due to the social expectations around receiving a present. Many of us all feel pressure to exclaim, thank the gifter profusely, and make a big deal over the gift. That may not be who we are and how we operate. We may need time to process what has been given to us, and we may prefer to thank the gift giver in private. Comfort routine. Another challenging aspect of the holidays is major disruption in routine. Some of us find the predictability and consistency of a routine comforting. Operating outside of usual routine can really throw us off, so keeping some semblance of structure and predictability can help a lot. Fair and realistic expectations. It's absolutely okay if our holidays don't look like the ones in the movies. We can create our own family traditions that best meet everyone's needs. There are no rules we have to follow. We can do what works best for our families. Let's prioritise our relationships and the people we care about over optics and meeting arbitrary social expectations. So good luck and happy holidays.
Think it's sound advice.
Like, it reinforces the message that we've been saying repeatedly already. Don't think the Christmas that you see in films or on adverts even, that's the standard that you have to aspire to, because you would think that everybody has their Christmas in different ways from each other anyway. So why feed into this fantasy Christmas, the commercial side of things, or even fictional films that are promoting a particular story tries to share, tries to generalise. Maybe not in a bad way, but just like some people seem to think that's something they feel under pressure to aspire to.
I think there's a thing about this time of year that's an exaggeration of what happens to us at other times of year. And that is that people try to enforce something upon us. You know, come and do this. And we're not ready when they immediately suggest it and we recoil from it. And my general advice is to, if you found that you've done that to an autistic person, to just give us space and allow us to change our minds. Don't double down and push us further. Just give us a space to change our minds, and we might decide that this is one of the times that we're going to do something different, change. And it's always a good thing. We like change. We like to do new different things. We just don't like being told exactly what to do to fit the convention in the same way that maybe you're more comfortable with if you're neurotypical. So just back off, give us space, give us a chance to come back again, and double the time you would think it is between how much space we need. Just double or triple that time.
Post is from Scottish Autism. Scotland's autism charity for over 50 years. And what they've shared is about being delighted to declare this year's Christmas market a tremendous success. Last weekend we held our annual market showcasing bespoke artworks, sweet treats, wreaths and more from our opportunity service. Makers Cafe, Cartini Nurseries and Inspire. We were even treated to some Christmas classics from our Inspire choir. Thank you to everyone who came along and helped raise £1,700. The funds raised will be used to support services and providing day opportunities for autistic people.
Well done. 1700's quite good. Yeah, very positive.
I'm just thinking we should put it in our diary for next year, and it would be one of the opportunities where you could actually speak in a non-pressured environment to somebody from Scottish Autism, because they don't generally answer your emails.
The next post is from Joy of Autism, which is a personal blog. This page is dedicated to my son Jacob and for all autistics and their families and friends. My goal is to inform, advocate, educate and share. Smiles. And what I've shared is about autism and perfectionism. Perfectionism is very common among autistics. It's an unhealthy need to do things perfectly. Hear perfect and have perfection surround you. Perfectionism is driven by fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of disapproval, and fear of not meeting impossible standards and unattainable goals, all to avoid or minimize shame, blame, and judgment. Perfectionism can be both a good and a bad. Those who have it are often the very hard workers and put their best effort into everything they do. But this comes at the high cost of their mental and sometimes physical well-being. So,
Is this overcompensation?
well, perfectionism, in my experience, is something that drives me to work at do things the best as I can. But sometimes it does affect mental health being, because you think, for some reason, even though that I've been told that I do great work, I've been told that I do well, I get many plaudits, but I'm never that satisfied or satisfied enough. But I feel that that keeps me driving forward. But sometimes I also feel that I don't give myself enough credit and enough reward in terms of taking a break and taking it easy. And that sometimes is quite hard to do. Although I do it, it's quite intense in doing it, because I feel that sometimes things have been left unfinished.
Yeah, I've never understood perfectionism. It's one of many things I don't understand that people seem to take for granted. People have often said I was a perfectionist, but they were never able to tell me why and in what way. And I don't think I am. I'm actually lackadaisical, as my dad used to say. I couldn't give a shit. You know, it's like, I'll just let things slide. If I'm into something, you'll be into it, but it won't last long, you know. So that's why I asked about overcompensation, because sometimes I feel perfectionism is this idea of like overcompensating, as described in the picture. Fear of making mistakes and disapproval and not meeting impossible standards and unattainable goals. I mean, who gives you these goals and standards? Is it yourself? Have you inherited that from the world out there that supplies this information to you? Yeah, perfectionism. It's one of these. A lot of these posts just make me think too much and I get dead confused. I don't really like thinking that much about certain things.
Yeah, I think you've picked on something really helpful, though, here to say. Because there is an element to autistic perfectionism that is a defense mechanism. It's if you feel that you are prepared and over-prepared for a situation, you're going to be able to cope with the situation better, because you feel as though you're going to be knocked back socially anyway in lots of ways. So the one way that you can make sure that you get valued is by doing a job that's better than anybody else's. And that's what I would say comes with the overcompensation aspect to it. I would also say that there is an aspect to perfectionism where it's much more natural for us to follow something and try and get the whole of something worked out as a complete thing, rather than just accepting little bits of it, because there seems to be a thing that we need to really kind of understand and put things together in a kind of whole. Other people are quite happy to just pick bits of it. If it doesn't make full sense to us, we're uncomfortable in lots of circumstances, and that can lead to a situation where other people see us doing that, seeing us really thinking about something, and they say, well, that's way above where I would be. That sort of standard you're dealing with, the detail you're dealing with, would be more than they would expect. So they call you perfectionist on the basis of that. And it's a pejorative term to keep us down. I feel generally that I have, in the past, experienced when I was younger, a kind of perfectionism that meant I didn't do things. I would work things out to such a degree of what would be absolutely necessary on something that it would become self-defeating, and it would become so big it wouldn't get done. And the only way I've been able to manage and do projects and get things done is a certain amount of compartmentalization and only dealing and focusing on certain small parts of it, and then another small part and another small part, and kind of pushing off into the future that whole skeleton of the whole thing together, the whole strategy. But I know that I've had a strategy at the beginning, but I don't concentrate on it because it becomes something that stops you achieving. Does any of that make any kind of sense?
Yes, it does. Can you ever understand everything, or totally, or the whole thing? I mean, you said you break it down and compartmentalize it. That doesn't even help, because at the end of the day, what is the goal? do you believe in the goal? Do you love it? You know, is it your joy? So, I don't know. It's all about what you're trying to achieve, I imagine.
And there again, you give us the whole Confucius, the whole, Kung Fu philosophy. You're right. It does depend on what the goal is. And we do have the wrong goal. And we are pushing ourselves. And these things are within the structures of the society that we have this version of perfectionism where we're doing something that supposedly is important. Whereas the real importance is probably to enjoy the moment that we're living. The cliche of living in the moment has truth in it. And, our goal, I think, in life should be a much more varied movement away from perfectionism, but still understanding that we enjoy the strategy in the whole. So giving ourselves a break and letting ourselves off the hook and embracing the idea of a good enough job and reducing until that thing becomes so easy and small, it's no big deal.
Yeah, I can relate to that, definitely. The thing that I've done in my life is I've always made sure that I've got something to do, which gives me an incentive to make an effort. And if I feel a bit flat or whatever it's like, it's something that I can push myself towards, like a goal. And a lot of things I'm involved in, sometimes it can be quite high pressured and there's a lot of stuff to do, but what I do is I, prioritise what I feel needs to be done sooner. Also split it up in a way which makes it smaller, so the small jobs that all roll into one in the end, but it'll all be complete when it's done. And after you go over each small job, each challenge you put yourself, it feels, progressive and it feels positive and it gives you the incentive to keep going. But also sometimes it gives you the incentive to take a break and know that you've done some things and you're planning to do the rest of it or some of it the next day or so. And then it kind of keeps as a positive thing in your mind rather than feeling that you've left a job half done. I've learned to do that, fairly recently. And a lot of that is through our own discussions and hearing from other people's experiences and how people, give advice and how people approach things in a more positive way and in a more healthy way.
Yeah, we're learning from each other and we're reminding each other and we're reinforcing each other as well in positive ways. Justin is texting, he's saying, taking it on bit by bit, chunk by chunk, compartmentalizing things. And then a phrase in quotes, one brick at a time, and then a nice graphic of bricks being built. It really is those cliches of restricting everything so it's not too daunting, taking it a chunk at a time, don't over perfect, and try to take the shortcuts of a good enough job because your standards might be well above what is expected.
The last post is from Autistic Self-Advocacy Network of Australia and New Zealand. And it says, together advocating for all autistic people, we are run by autistic people for autistic people. We work to centre the voices of autistic adults with a specific focus on systemic advocacy and empowering our community with self-advocacy skills. And what they're talking about in this post is about sending emails as a way of communication. And it says, sending emails. Email can be a helpful way to communicate for autistic people, especially with professionals and service providers. The benefits of sending an email: you can write it at any time. You can take your time. You can refer to it later. It's fast and cheap, and it can be sent to many people. When writing an email, think about who you want to see your message, what you want to say, what column you would like, relevant facts and events, and an appropriate greeting and sign-off. And a tip, save your email and review it later if you aren't feeling calm.
There's a lot of advice there. I only want to pick out one thing, and that is about composing an email, especially if you've composed that email late at night and in an emotional state, to put that into drafts without a recipient in it and then come back to it, because the way we express ourselves is not always readily accessible by the person that we receive it. I am very aware that I have sent many emails in the past, and an alternative way of reading that email changes the sense of the email radically. So, especially late at night, let's put those emails in draft without a recipient so they don't go accidentally anywhere, and then look at it the next day.
It's not like the private letter, is it? It's the nature of the beast that technology's made these mistakes too easy. You know, whereas sending a letter back in the old slow world, you would take your time about these issues.
What I find very beneficial about emails is it gives you a chance to think about what you're putting down, what you're saying. Especially if there's some quite intense. And a lot of it sometimes is you're not entirely got all the facts, so if you save it and then you get back there, it's a very good template. Because I've had instances in the past where I've tried to do things verbally, and things have been taken out of context, or like a decision's been made, or something's been said, and maybe the sound of the voice or the way the words came out sounded like too harsh or too brutal or too cheeky. I think that emails can find a way to help you kind of regulate the words you're putting out and put things right, because I've had those situations, and a lot of emails that I've done since then has helped kind of deal with, kind of not always, but difficult situations. And not just with ones with life with banks and all that, which are already difficult. What's good with that is you get time to explain, and that gives a more comfortable conversation depending what's been discussed or what's been inquired about. Thanks very much, everybody, for taking part in the conversation. And thanks for the people who have shared those Facebook posts for which we've been discussing tonight. So this is Live Unmasked for the 15th of December 2024, which is part of Spectrum Voices Conversation.
People
Well, that's an example that we have from what we talk about in the 555, Harry's Autism podcast, every Sunday. Without fail, a group of people get together and make a recording live on air to make a podcast out of it later. It's a project we're very proud of here at Autistic Radio. For more than 2 years, we have been reliable. I'm going to play another one of our podcasts now for a little while. We won't manage to get through all of it before the next live show. It's Adult Autism Discovery from the Late Diagnosis Show, episode number 8. Why diagnosis?
worry about when they're coming to diagnosis late in life is this kind of imposter syndrome and the idea that maybe they're not autistic, and should they get diagnosed, and do you need a formal diagnosis to like officially be autistic? And generally in the community, self-diagnosis is completely valid. There's something quite uniquely autistic about correctly self-diagnosing yourself. Is not the sort of thing you do like in the pub or over a cup of tea. Like, I don't think anyone who's self-diagnosed or self-identified, another term, as autistic has done so lightly. And there are tests online that you can do. And I don't want people to think that this is like, oh, Dr. Google, diagnose yourself online. But some of these are really, really good, like really, really accurate. So there's a website called aspietests.org. It's aspietests.org. It's not a particularly flashy website. It's basically just one page with some links to different diagnostic tools. There's the RADS are the Ritvo Autism Asperger Diagnostic Scale Revised. If that comes up in a pub quiz, I want credit. And the Autism Spectrum Quotient, the AQ, which are both pretty reliable. They've tested the validity of these tests, they being the scientists. And there was a study in the Netherlands where people took the RADS-R, which is the first one on aspietests.org, and 80% of people that were identified as autistic from that test went on to be formally diagnosed by a clinician. So it's fairly accurate. It will also, when you do these tests on aspietests.org, it will show you like where your results fall compared to neurotypical population, and then compared to diagnosed autistic people. And it does split it by gender. So you can see where according to these tests, I scored higher or within the range of autistic men. And and then I went on to be diagnosed. So I think they're fairly accurate. The imposter syndrome thing is like, I think everyone has that as well. And I know I certainly did before I'd got into the community a little bit more. I wasn't going to not self-identify as autistic if I, but I didn't feel like I was kind of allowed, in inverted commas, to signpost people or to give advice or to respond to questions about being autistic until I had that bit of paper. But what I've learned from being in the community for much longer now is that self-identification's like really valid and accepted. Being formally diagnosed can be kind of a privilege, really. It's not something that's open to everybody. There are cultures around the world where autism isn't even really recognized as a thing. There are places where it's stigmatized. There are places where the culture kind of precludes diagnosis on some of the traits of autism because of cultural differences. So the getting diagnosed as autistic is a very Western thing. Like it exists in diagnostic manuals that are US and Europe centric. So the rest of the world does not have diagnostic standards that take into account other cultures. So that's one of the issues. There's also issues with waiting lists. It can take 4 or 5 years sometimes to get diagnosed on the NHS, and there's no guarantee then that the diagnostician that you see will have an up-to-date understanding of autism in adults. So you may wait for years to see someone to get diagnosed, and they have an outdated idea of what autism is, and you miss out on that diagnosis. It can cost a lot of money to get diagnosed, so there's a financial barrier there as well. And there are other barriers or other unintended negative effects of diagnosis that I didn't even think about until after I was diagnosed. And there are countries in the world that you cannot emigrate to, or it's incredibly difficult to emigrate to, and you have to give a lot more proof than anyone else applying to move to if you're autistic.
I'm wondering, Liz, if you've brought up a lot here, and maybe we should sort of interject some of our own experiences of some of the things you've already brought up. I mean, when we go back to what you first were talking about with imposter syndrome, for instance, I think that's really brave that you've expressed that out there. And I don't think it's in people's heads. It's this thing about trying to validate the truth of looking into autism for yourself without having an outside diagnosis, isn't it? Do you see where I'm coming from? Is that what you're meaning here? Right at the beginning, in what you're saying, is concerns that it might not be a good idea sometimes to get diagnosed. Is that true?
Yeah, I think there are things that not everyone's aware of, these issues even existing before
Yeah.
they get diagnosed.
Yeah.
And it's worth knowing some of those ahead of time.
It's like you really
If you're
feel there's a whole load of stuff people definitely need to know about this before they make decisions. Do you see where I'm coming from? You really have a passion to tell people an awful lot and make them consider and think about an awful lot before they go anywhere near this.
I just think the information should be out there and talked about, so that it's that people can access and make up their own mind.
Yeah.
But I think, like, if you're a parent and you get diagnosed later in life, that could cause issues with social services and with even with schools and teachers as well. I mean, not that a teacher would have access to a parent's medical records, but if that information can sometimes bring a lot of stigma in, and then that causes problems. And you might end up with social services coming around and checking that you're a fit parent, even though, you know.
That's a real concern, and that's come up recently. That's come up recently in one of the online forums I'm on, in somebody actually asking about diagnosis for themselves as parents when their children are being diagnosed, and getting social services involved to help them as autistic people with their parenting. And people have been turning around to them and saying, whoa, watch what you're doing before you invite social services into your life. You know, you are technically both now identified as two disabled, vulnerable people.
Yeah.
Technically, under the law, whether you be in your late 20s and intelligent and holding down a job, if you're both autistic and both that's on your records, you're putting yourself in a situation. My wife and I have concerns about this. I am diagnosed. She is not. There is more chance of her being listened to as we progress into our old age as an undiagnosed woman than myself as a diagnosed male. The stereotypes that go with me as I grow older mean I start to lose autonomy in the system because I'm diagnosed. Are these the sort of issues? There are real negatives to being diagnosed.
Yeah. No, I think that's really valid point. When you're, I mean, hopefully by the time we're at the point where, you know, getting into old age, attitudes will have changed. That's kind of one of the reasons why I'm vocal about stuff, is to change perceptions and change the stereotypes that we have.
Me too. Absolutely. Me too. And some of the other people that I know that are starting as late diagnosed people to speak out on in podcasts and in any kind of forums. That is our concern at this moment, and that's why we need this show.
Sometimes people think that a diagnosis will help them overcome the imposter syndrome, and obviously it does. That's kind of, validation is the antidote to imposter syndrome. But people sometimes say, oh, well, if you're diagnosed, you can get support services. Yeah, to that I would say, what fucking support services?
I have received nothing, as far as I can work out.
Like, yeah, there aren't any. The support I've had, I've paid for, right? And I didn't need to give any paperwork to my counsellor. You know, I haven't needed to hand over any proof, ever.
The support I got was from Morris and having an organisation and being introduced through Morris to other organisations, and then ending up making this wider self-support group that Autistic Radio has become.
Yeah, we only get support when we find it ourselves, and we don't need to prove our neurotype in order to get help from our peers, because we can sniff each other out. That sounded wrong.
Yeah. But where would we find our peers without the scene? Or we can, without recognition, or we can, I suppose, without diagnosis.
Yes, you're right, Morris. You're absolutely right. That is an imperative we have. We cannot find our scene, but I don't think diagnosis really is the gatekeeper to that.
No, it shouldn't be. Yeah.
No, I don't think diagnosis is, and I've certainly never seen anybody insist that somebody show their diagnosis, and unless they're arseholes doing it.
Has that happened ever to you, Morris? You?
Well, I've had support with employment placing, which has worked out much better than the competitive job search system, and it certainly wasn't that service's own fault. It's just their funding. That's obviously it was. My diagnosis made me eligible. Yeah.
So yeah, occasionally there are things that work, you know.
But you're not required to. But to get accommodations in the workplace, you don't need proof of diagnosis.
Well, I'm talking about actual getting the work at all. Yeah.
He was in a scheme whereby they were actually particularly aiming for autistic people and giving them a way in.
And they insisted that you hand over your medical records in order to obtain that employment.
They knew from me being registered in the one-stop shop that I was diagnosed. Just check the box. Perfectly civil.
But it kind of was a requirement, is what we're saying.
Well, that seems a little bit discriminatory, to be honest.
But irrelevant of that, there are very few things that are out there, whether you're diagnosed or undiagnosed, and diagnosis doesn't particularly help you.
No. I've given over my diagnosis report once in order to be accommodated in the workplace, and I don't know whether it worked against me or not, but I didn't get any accommodations. And they were not, I wasn't asking for anything ridiculous.
It's not about diagnosis for me. The big thing is about realization. And once you realize that you're autistic, you are on a journey to trying to make head or tail of it for you personally. Not to be an expert in autism, but to be an expert in your own autism, and links that it has to other people's autism is a way of exploring it, and it helps your peers. What we need is a way of getting to our peers. It's not more diagnosis.
It depends who you are. Some people do find that the diagnosis, it's not as proof, but as it's like dare I say it, a qualification. I know what everybody's saying about, the diagnosis and the model and all that, but some people feel that they need that. So it's validated in their head, not to prove to anybody. It's just so that they're convinced within themselves they've got an answer of some kind, and then they work on. But then they can build on that as they wish. I mean, there's someone that I know that is looking to go through the diagnosis pathway, but it's not going out to prove to anybody or to make it they feel they're more, if they get that, they're more autistic than the people that are autistic that don't have diagnosis. It's just more for a self sort of assurance in their head. So there's a lot of people out there that prefer that model, so it kind of helps them. But other people believe that it's not necessary. They don't feel the need to validate themselves that way. They can go through, like for instance, those aspect tests thing. I actually tried one of them It was one of the 40 questions. I can't remember what one it was. Maybe the third one down. And I just thought, I'm going to give this a try, see what it's like. And it confirmed that I may be autistic and I should seek professional advice.
Oh, that must have been a relief.
Well, it didn't say it like that, but the language is quite funny how it said it. It was kind of a recommendation, and I encourage someone that I know to use that particular one because I had. So they've went down that route. They've seen some.
Realizing I'm autistic, and now, no, how do I say this? It's not the diagnosis. It's not the time between realizing you might be autistic and it's something you want to get into and discover, and the diagnosis. It's the whole period of time that you are going to upset in your life. The largeness of realizing you are autistic and then realizing that you have a choice to make about getting diagnosed or not, that thing in itself is already huge, and almost all of it is finding out about autism, other autistic people, what it's like, going back through your own history. And that's not going to be particularly supported whether you have a diagnosis or not. And you're going to have to do that whether you get diagnosed or not. That's the important thing. It feels often before you get diagnosed as though there is something to attain there. But the reality when you look back in hindsight is that that wasn't the important thing. It was the realization and then the gradual research to get an understanding of what autism is personally for you.
I'd like to recant my assertion that having the diagnosis, has never given me any access to anything, because I think having that bit of paper is the only reason I got to keep my ESA for the year that I was allowed to have it, because the person doing the assessment, this was back in, it must have been pre-pandemic, so I actually went to a place and she asked to photocopy my diagnosis paperwork, and I think that's the only reason that they carried on paying it for contributions based. That and the blind rattled and I jumped out of my skin, which was pretty obvious. Like, it's clearly I'm either autistic or I have quite severe anxiety disorder.
That's the thing as well about the diagnosis thing. It's the way that autism is treated in terms of it's a disability and the support financial if you're not working, or the associated anxiety you have because you've got autism and you're not being able to find any kind of work. So you need to sort of go down the sort of negative. I know back, kind of sidetracking a little bit, but that's the sort of the culture you're up against. It's got support there, but you've got to put autism or your autism in a certain way, in a certain model. Basically, there's something wrong with you because you've got autism and you need financial support because of that. I mean, that's difficult to ask of somebody. I mean, that's why I get ESA, I get, and that's based on because I have that diagnosis of autism.
And that is one of the absolute good reasons, because autism in some systems around the world is a disability, and people's experience of it can put them in a position where, through no fault of their own, they're not available for work as work is offered in the system. So that is a very good reason.
Yeah, that is the bit of support that exists.
Well, that's a pretty key one in capitalism.
I don't even know what it is.
Support allowance.
So employment support allowance is about 20 quid a week more than job seekers allowance if you're unable to work temporarily or full time because of a disability or health condition. And you have to provide doctor's notes regularly until you're assessed. And then even after you're assessed, you're then put into one of two groups. You may get the higher rate if you have mobility challenges as well as non-mobility challenges. Otherwise, you're put into it's just like jumping through hoops, and it's a lot of work.
But they're in some systems around the world, insurance benefits, employment allowances, all kinds of different benefits from the state might be in place if you have a diagnosis. So that is a different consideration.
Yeah. This is something that can last like half a lifetime as well.
Yeah, it's a tiny bit from the state to try and deal with the discrimination you're going to have in the workplace.
Yes.
And the inappropriateness for the workplace for most autistic people.
Well, that's true.
But going down to diagnosis personally, that's a different world. That's a different subject, isn't it? And what it means to you and how much it removes from you your autonomy could be a very important thing for you. How you end up having to still do all the work to really understand yourself might not be apparent. It might look as though you're going to get some kind of ticket to go and join some services or some outside activities that make you meet other autistic people, but they're few and far between. Well, I'm going to stop us there because we're going over to a live broadcast now. Every Sunday we have a drop-in group which is not normally broadcast. We have it as a private conversation, and we do make a podcast out of it from the voices who have already given their permission, but most people drop by with their text and their words and they don't appear. During radio days it's a little different because the people appearing in the 444 drop-in are people who have already given their permission.